Hi, I'm Mara Lee. My sister stood up at family dinner, pointed at my newborn, and said, "He has my fiancé's eyes." She demanded a paternity test in front of everyone. No one stopped her, not even him. They didn't ask how I'd been sleeping, or why I'd been missing work, or who'd been paying the rent while they celebrated their engagement. They just stared, like I was already guilty. But you know what hurt the most? She didn't want the truth. She wanted me erased. And when the results came back, it wasn't just their wedding that got canceled. Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Evan's eyes were the first thing anyone noticed. Hazel with golden flecks. Like my grandfather's, the only other person in the family who had them. It felt like fate reaching across generations, like Papa Will had come back through my son just to say, "You got this, baby girl." I took my time getting ready that day. The sun had dipped behind the bare oaks outside the cottage, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. I wore the pearl hairpin Mama gave me when I turned 18, the one she hadn't mentioned since. I don't even know why I picked it. Maybe I just wanted her to notice. Maybe I hoped the person I was, standing at her door with a baby in my arms, would be enough this time. The roast smell hit me the second I stepped into the house. It was warm, like always, but there was a chill underneath, a quiet that clung to the corners, the kind that reminded you family dinners weren't always about food. "Look who finally decided to show," Alicia called from the kitchen. Her voice was sweet, like a peach going bad. Mama barely looked up from the gravy. "We started early." I adjusted Evan in his carrier and smiled. "That's fine. I'm just happy to be here." Grayson stood to pull out a chair for Alicia. He didn't even glance my way. Polite, polished, forgettable. I'd barely met him twice, but something about the way he moved, controlled, calculated, rubbed me wrong. Alicia sat beside him, perfect posture, perfectly ironed blouse, perfect disdain under her lashes. She eyed Evan like he was an uninvited guest, not her nephew. Daddy made a show of blessing the meal, and everyone chimed in like we were still the family from 20 years ago. I sat across from Alicia, my plate barely touched, trying not to flinch every time her eyes landed on Evan. The room smelled like roast and resentment. Then it came, sharp and soft, like a knife hidden in velvet. "His eyes," Alicia said, her fork tapping once against the plate. "They're not from your side." The clinking stopped. I blinked. "Excuse me?" She shrugged, reaching for her wine. "I just said, his eyes don't look like ours. That's all." Mama didn't miss a beat, jumped in with, "Marilee, pass the rolls, would you?" Like nothing had happened. Daddy cleared his throat and asked Grayson about a new promotion. Grayson just nodded, quiet like always, like he knew something and didn't want to say it first. I held Evan a little closer and smiled like none of it cut, but inside, something cracked. After dinner, I offered to help with the dishes. Needed air. Alicia followed me into the kitchen like a shadow I hadn't asked for. She waited until the water ran and no one could hear us. "You always wanted what I had," she said, leaning against the counter like this was just another sisterly gripe about clothes or curfews. I laughed once, nervous. "I don't know what you're talking about." Her eyes narrowed. "Sure you don't." The sink filled, warm water clouded with soap and steam. Evan cooed from the swing seat nearby, clueless to the storm building in his mother's chest. Alicia stepped in close. "You thought no one would notice? But I know betrayal when it looks me in the eye." I froze. The implication hung there like smoke, thick, unspoken, poisoned. "You've lost your mind," I whispered. She didn't blink, and somehow that scared me more than anything she said. I turned off the water and dried my hands slowly, carefully. Like if I just moved right, said the right words, this would all pass. But her gaze followed me with that same cold calculation. We walked back into the dining room in silence. Evan had fallen asleep, his little fist curled tight against his chest. I thought maybe we'd all just pretend this never happened, but Alicia wasn't done. She raised her glass, smile like glass, sharp and breakable. Her voice rang out across the table, slicing through any illusion we had left. "Since we're all here," she said, "I want a paternity test." The room stilled. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. And that was the moment my fork clattered to the plate, because silence hit louder than any scream. My fork hit the plate like thunder in a church. You know that kind of silence, the kind where even the ticking of a wall clock feels loud? That's what filled the dining room. No one moved. Not a breath, not a blink. Evan let out a soft coo, still curled against my chest, unaware that the air around him had frozen. Mama's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. Daddy looked straight at the roast like it might offer an escape route. I stayed still, fingers clenched around my linen napkin. Alicia, seated like a queen at the head of the table beside Grayson, didn't stop there. She tilted her head, voice louder now, sharp enough to slice through bone. "You want a test? Fine, but let's not pretend this is news to anyone. You think I didn't notice the timing? Chicago trip? You both looked real cozy when I came back." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Grayson. He just sat there, stone still, his hands folded, face unreadable. That silence from him, it was worse than shouting. "Alicia, that's enough." I finally found my voice. "You're making up stories." She let out a hollow laugh and tossed her napkin onto the table. "You've always needed attention, just not from my fiancé, merrily." Grayson blinked. That was it, just a blink. No outrage, no defense. I began, but Alicia cut me off. "Don't lie to my face. Not after everything." Her chest rose and fell fast. "You want to deny it? Then prove it. Take the test." Mama choked back a sob. "This is not the place," she whispered, like the room wasn't already burning down. Daddy cleared his throat, voice tight. "There will be no drama under my roof." I turned to him. "Daddy, you think I said no drama," he repeated, not even looking at me. That hurt more than Alicia's words. The others? My cousin Bethany stared down at her empty plate. Uncle Terry got up and quietly walked out like his legs couldn't carry the weight of all that silence. No one stood up for me. Evan shifted slightly, his little fingers brushing my collarbone, and I swallowed the lump in my throat. Then Grayson stood up. All eyes turned to him. He smoothed the front of his shirt, then looked right at Alicia and said, "Let her go. This isn't the time." And just like that, Alicia snapped. "That's exactly what you said back then," she shouted, voice raw. "You said, 'Let her go, Alicia. It's not the time.' You remember that? Don't act like you forgot." His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. I couldn't breathe. My knees felt weak, but I stood anyway. "I'm leaving," I said, hoisting Evan against my shoulder. "This is not okay. None of this is okay." No one stopped me, not even Mama. As I stepped outside, the cold slapped my cheeks. The sun had set, and the porch light buzzed faintly above me. I wrapped Evan tighter in his blanket, my hands shaking, not from the weather, but from everything that had just collapsed around me. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. Alicia. "We'll see what the lab says." Buzz. Alicia. "You're dead to me." I didn't cry. Not yet. The wind tugged at my hair. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere behind me, the door creaked shut. I stood on the porch a long moment, Evan now quiet against my chest. His little breaths warm against my skin. I looked up at the sky, the stars barely peeking through the clouds, and whispered to him, "You didn't deserve this. Neither of us did." He whimpered softly, and I kissed the top of his head. I wasn't sure where to go yet, but I knew I couldn't go back in there. I didn't drive straight home that night. Instead, I turned down a street I hadn't seen in over a year. The maple trees had long shed their leaves, and the porch lights on the houses blinked warm and familiar. But none of it comforted me. Reed's house sat at the bend, just like always. Tan siding, black shutters, the same dent in the mailbox from the night we tried to parallel park his dad's old truck. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Evan stirred in the car seat behind me, a soft whimper rising from his tiny lungs. "I know, baby. I don't want to be here either." I killed the engine and sat for a moment, letting the cold of the steering wheel seep into my hands, anchor me. The porch light flicked on, automatic maybe, or maybe someone inside had seen me pull in. Either way, I was out of time. I unbuckled Evan gently and cradled him to my chest, covering him with a soft blanket. He nuzzled into me, unaware of the storm swirling around him. My knock on the door was hesitant, almost guilty. It opened faster than I expected. Reed stood there barefoot, in sweatpants and a worn hoodie that used to be mine. His hair was tousled like he'd been sleeping, and his face was caught between confusion and something harder. Something like anger, but more stunned. "Merrily?" I didn't know what to say. "Hi." He blinked, his gaze dropped to the bundle in my arms. "Is that—" "No?" I said it quickly, but not harshly, just honest. He didn't move, just stared at Evan, then back at me, then Evan again. "You disappear for over a year, then show up with a baby?" My mouth opened, then closed. What could I say that didn't sound like an excuse? "It's not yours," I said again, quieter this time. "I'm not here for anything. I needed to see someone who didn't look at me like I ruined everything." His jaw worked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. "Who's the father?" I hesitated. "Grayson." He laughed, bitter and short. "Of course. Reed. No, Mar. You don't get to show up like this, holding a baby like a confession, and expect me to— What? Be a shoulder to cry on? Offer a crib?" His voice wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was raw, honest, and I deserved every bit of it. I took a small step back, the porch creaking beneath me. I shouldn't have come. He didn't stop me. "Yeah, probably not." Evan made a small coo, as if trying to soften the tension we couldn't fix. I nodded once, more to myself than to Reed, and turned toward the car. My eyes stayed dry, but something inside me ached in a way I couldn't soothe. The drive back was quiet. Evan fell asleep somewhere around the second traffic light, his tiny fingers curled around the edge of his blanket. I didn't play music. I didn't need any more noise. My apartment looked smaller than I remembered. The living room lamp was still on from earlier, casting a soft yellow glow over the bare walls. I placed Evan gently in his bassinet and pulled a throw blanket around my shoulders, not because it was cold, but because I felt empty. I opened my phone. I shouldn't have. I knew what I'd see. Alicia's latest post sat at the top of my feed, time-stamped an hour ago. A photo of her wine glass held up against candlelight, captioned, "Some people never change." Thousands of likes. A few comments with knowing emojis. One from my aunt. "Proud of you for standing up for yourself, sweetheart." Of course. I scrolled further. A comment from my cousin. "Family always reveals its true colors when the lights go out." I closed the app, tossed the phone onto the couch but not far enough away. The voicemail icon blinked red. One new message. I already knew who it was from. I hit play. "Hi, honey, it's Mom. Listen, I don't want this getting any uglier than it already is. Just take the test and clear things up, sweetie. Then we can all move on, okay? I'm sure Alicia will calm down once she sees the truth. We don't want any lingering doubts in the family." That word, we, landed like a cold hand on my shoulder. Not one person had asked how I was doing. Not one person asked how Evan was sleeping, or eating, or if he had enough formula. No one had shown up. They had all turned their backs, waiting for a test to decide who we were allowed to be. I walked back to the bassinet and looked down. Evan's chest rose and fell, slow and steady. His lips twitched in sleep like he was dreaming of something kind. I reached down and tucked the blanket under his chin. "They don't see you," I whispered. "They never really saw me either." The room felt still for a long time after that. Just the low hum of the heater, the occasional tick of a pipe. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water I didn't drink, and stared at the refrigerator. The magnet that held up our grocery list was crooked. I fixed it. It was a small thing, but it made me feel like I still had control over something. Then came the knock. Sharp. 3 times. Firm but not aggressive. I glanced at the clock. 8:43 p.m. I didn't expect anyone. Definitely not tonight. Evan stirred but didn't wake. I opened the door slowly, the chain still on. A man in a gray delivery uniform stood there, holding an envelope. Marilee Jameson? Yes? Signature required. I unlatched the chain, signed, and took the envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, sealed. He didn't say anything else, just nodded and walked back toward the street where a van waited with headlights on. I closed the door and turned the envelope over in my hands. It was from Alicia's lawyer. I recognized the firm. She had used them during her merger negotiations last year. They were known for being ruthless. I opened it. Inside, a subpoena. Not just for me. Evan's name was listed too. DNA testing. They weren't asking anymore. The name on the envelope wasn't just mine. It listed Evan too. I stared at it so long I forgot I was still standing by the door. The paper was heavy, official, sharp at the edges like it knew it had power. I pressed it to my chest as if that would soften the blow, but it didn't. Evan stirred in his blanket beside me, his little feet twitching. 2 days later, I walked into a legal office that smelled like lemon polish and detachment. The walls were white, not the soft kind, but that sterile, bleached white that reminds you you're not welcome to stay long. I held Evan close in his carrier, the strap cutting into my shoulder. The receptionist didn't smile. Just a clipboard and a "please sign in." The man who greeted me was in his mid-50s, neat hair, stiff jaw. "Ms. Hadley," he said like I'd interrupted a golf game. "This way." Inside, Alicia's lawyer sat at one end of the long table, a court-appointed officer at the other. They didn't bother with pleasantries. "We're here to eliminate all speculation," the attorney began, sliding a folder toward me. "For the protection of Alicia's upcoming marriage, the sooner this is behind us, the better." He said it with a tone so bland it made me feel dirtier. They didn't ask if I needed a minute. No one offered me water. When they gestured for Evan, I hesitated. He was just a baby. Mine. And somehow that wasn't enough to protect him. The technician swabbed his mouth gently, professionally. But the whole thing felt invasive. I wanted to scream, "He's not your evidence," but I didn't. I just held his hand. No one looked me in the eye. To them, I was just a line item, a threat wrapped in yoga pants, holding a child with suspicious cheeks and bad timing. As I sat in that room, blinking at the bland beige art and ignoring the clock ticking too loudly, something floated up from memory. A birthday party when we were kids. Alicia and I wore matching blue dresses. She'd whispered, "You're my emotional twin. No one gets me like you." We'd hugged so tightly our curls tangled. Now? She wouldn't even speak to me directly. She let legal letters and lawyers speak for her. How did we get here? I left through the side entrance like they asked, just to avoid unnecessary attention, they said. But that didn't stop it. By the time I got Evan into the back seat, I saw the flicker. Camera lens, low car window across the street. Click, again. I turned my head fast, but it was too late. 4 hours later, sitting cross-legged on my floor with a bowl of cereal gone soggy beside me, my phone buzzed. I picked it up and stared at the screen. The headline glared from a celebrity blog. "Fiancé scandal? Who's the baby mama?" There I was, leaving the office, diaper bag slung low, Evan squinting in the sunlight. My hair was frizzed, my face pale. Below the photo was Alicia's official statement. "We ask for privacy and compassion during this deeply emotional time." They made her sound noble. Me? Like I crawled out of nowhere with a child-shaped grenade. And then the text started. "Aunt Margie, what in God's name have you done?" My cousin Justin, "You just can't stop making drama, can you?" Even Uncle Pete chimed in, "You've embarrassed the entire family." Not one of them asked if Evan was okay. If I was okay. Not even a, "What happened?" By the next morning, I couldn't take the silence anymore, not from the people who mattered. So I drove to my dad's shop. The front was just as I remembered, oil-stained concrete, a dented soda machine humming in the corner. I parked, got Evan out, and walked past the rust-colored pickup that never ran right. Dad was inside, wiping his hands on an old red cloth. He didn't look surprised to see me, just tired. "Hey, Dad," I said, voice small. He didn't return the greeting, just nodded toward the office. We sat across from each other, Evan resting in my lap. "I didn't know what else to do," I finally said. "I thought, maybe you'd believe me." He looked past me, eyes settling on the wall, like the truth might be carved into it. "Alicia wouldn't lie like this without a reason," he said slowly. "And if she's trying to protect her future, maybe you should think about why she felt she had to." I felt my breath go thin. "Are you saying this is my fault?" "I'm saying, maybe you owe her an apology. Maybe it's time to fix things before they get worse." I blinked, hard. "That's what you think this is? Some sibling spat I can fix with an apology?" He stood up. "I've got cars to get to, merrily." He didn't look at me again, just walked out, wiping his hands, same as before. I sat there, frozen. The silence of the office around me pressing against my chest like water. Something brushed against my leg. The shop dog, Bentley, old and sweet. He nudged my knee and laid his head in my lap. I scratched behind his ear. "Well," I whispered, "at least someone in this family still has a heart." I drove home slower this time. Every red light felt longer. Evan had fallen asleep in the back seat. I watched his tiny reflection in the mirror, his chest rising and falling like none of this touched him. And maybe that was the hardest part, how oblivious he was to the storm with his name at the center. The sun was beginning to dip when I pulled into my parking lot. The sky behind the apartments was soft orange and pink. I took one last breath, trying to find peace in it. We made it to the door. I kicked it closed behind me, dropped my keys into the bowl, and set Evan down gently. As I bent over to unstrap him, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a family member. No name, just a message. "You don't know the full story. Meet me tonight. I know what really happened." I stared at it. My stomach twisted. The number wasn't saved, but I knew the name. Reed. I stared at my phone screen as if it might flicker and vanish. It didn't. Just those few words, direct, unnerving. "Meet me tonight. I know what really happened." For a second I couldn't breathe. I looked down at Evan sleeping in his crib, unaware of the storm building around us. I changed into jeans and a dark sweater, tied my hair back, and packed a bottle and a burp cloth just in case. The sitter I'd been using, a kind college student from my old church, arrived quickly, thank goodness. I gave her a distracted smile, then drove through the misty night, the wipers clicking like a metronome over thoughts I couldn't control. The diner Reed mentioned was on the outskirts of town, one of those places with neon lights that flicker just enough to make you feel like you've stepped out of time. The parking lot was half empty. Inside, the air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and fried batter. A waitress with tired eyes nodded toward a booth in the back. He wasn't there yet. I sat with my back to the window, facing the door. My knee bounced. When Reed finally walked in, I barely recognized him, not because he looked different, but because the man I remembered was polished, charming, confident. This version had messy hair, a rumpled shirt, and shadows under his eyes. He slid into the booth without a word. We didn't greet each other. There wasn't room for small talk. He looked at me, eyes flickering toward the corner of the table. "You brought the baby?" "No," I said quietly. "He's at home." Reed let out a breath, then rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Good. He shouldn't be around this mess." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I don't know how to say this in a way that won't sound insane." His voice was hoarse. "But I never touched you, Marilee. Not like that. Not ever." I didn't flinch. I didn't lean back or forward. I just watched him. "But," he continued, "I think I was drugged that night." My stomach turned. He ran his hand through his hair. That night. Before Alicia's bachelorette weekend. There was this dinner with some of her family friends, a little pre-celebration thing. Nothing crazy. Wine, stories, laughter. But the next thing I remember, I was waking up in a hotel bed, my head pounding, shirt stained, phone gone, and Alicia was blowing up my voicemail asking why I hadn't come home. I blinked. Did you tell her what happened? I tried. She brushed it off, said I probably drank too much, said it was fine, just don't make it a habit. He laughed bitterly. Then she started pushing to move the wedding up, fast. Everything was rush, rush, rush. I leaned forward. And you thought, what? That someone set us up? He finally looked me in the eyes. I didn't know what to think. But when the photos surfaced, when the family started whispering, it all started to click. My mind raced. That night, I remembered waking up alone in that same hotel, confused, sore, and scared. I'd never told anyone the details. It had felt too unreal, too shameful. But now? I don't know what Alicia told you, Reed said. But I think someone wanted this to look like a scandal. And it worked. Outside, the rain picked up. It hit the windows like a ticking clock we were running out of. Then he pulled out his phone, swiped a few times, and turned the screen toward me. It was a photo. Me, sleeping, peacefully, my hair fanned over a pillow, and beside me, Evan, impossibly small, maybe only a few days old. The timestamp hit me like a punch. It was dated weeks before I even knew I was pregnant. Weeks before I had told anyone. Someone sent this to me, Reed said. No name, just the image, just enough to feed the fire. I stared at the photo, numb. It wasn't a candid, it was staged. Someone had wanted this moment captured, preserved, weaponized. That's not just bad timing, I murmured. That's manipulation. That's deliberate. Reed nodded. It's why I messaged you, because I don't think Alicia's just upset. I think she's scared. Scared of what? My voice came out quieter than I expected. He hesitated. There's more to Evan than just my eyes, Reed said. And she knows it. I froze. What do you mean, more than his eyes? His expression shifted. Unease, guilt, a trace of fear. That's the part I haven't figured out yet, he said slowly. But Alicia's not just trying to erase you. She's trying to bury something. My pulse thundered in my ears. All this time I thought the betrayal was about a mistake, about pride, about shame. But what if it wasn't? What if it was about power? The waitress walked by, refilling our water without a word. Reed looked at me like he wanted to say more, but then his phone lit up on the table. He glanced at it, jaw tightening. I have to go, he said, standing abruptly. She's starting to suspect I'm not where I said I'd be. He didn't wait for me to answer, just dropped a 20 on the table and disappeared into the rain. I sat there a while, listening to the drops drum against the windows. Then I reached for my coat. There were more layers to this story, and I was going to peel back everyone. I froze, hand still on my lukewarm mug. Reed didn't blink. I mean it literally, he said, voice low, like even the diner walls might be listening. It's not just the eyes. It's in the blood. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope, thick with folded documents. My breath caught. He passed it across the table with fingers trembling, more from resolve than nerves. I hesitated, then opened it. See the marker there? He asked, pointing to a highlighted line on a neonatal chart. It's called LQT Italian, a genetic trait, extremely rare, only passed down directly through my paternal line. I scanned the paper, trying to absorb the science between gasps of disbelief. And Evan has it? Reed nodded. It's dormant, but flagged during the newborn screening. It's the exact same variation my great-grandfather had, only male descendants carry it. I sat back. So that's why Alicia panicked. She saw this? Before I did, he replied grimly. I only got the copy last week. She intercepted everything after the hospital visit, convinced the pediatrician to hold results until further clarification. Said it would confuse me during wedding planning. I didn't think twice. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The diner window was streaked with faded raindrops, but the storm inside me was only starting. Reed rubbed his temple, his voice cracking slightly. She wanted to lock things down before I asked questions, before I saw Evan. A part of me still clung to doubt. But another part, the part that had watched Alicia bulldoze her way through every conflict with a bright smile and an iron grip, whispered that it made terrible, perfect sense. Back at my apartment the next morning, I shuffled around in my robe, trying to drink coffee, but mostly watching it go cold. Evan was at daycare for a few hours, something I used to fill with laundry or bill sorting. Not today. The knock on my door was soft, almost apologetic. I opened it to find no one, just a large, weathered manila envelope lying on the mat. No return address. Inside, photocopied pages, torn at the edges, some medical records, and, my breath hitched, a printout of Evan's birth certificate. At least, what looked like it, except this version had handwritten notes scrawled in red ink across the margins. The words, "Amended request, denied, origin signature mismatch." And then a smaller sticky note attached to the back, "Truth is a threat to power." My knees buckled. I sat on the floor, envelope in lap, heart racing. Truth is a threat to power. I ran my fingers over the certificate again. The doctor's name was correct. The hospital, correct. But under registrar signature, someone had drawn a shaky red circle. It wasn't mine. It wasn't even close. I grabbed my phone, scrolled to a contact I hadn't touched in months. Josie, a friend from college who now worked in medical records at County General. When she picked up, her voice was groggy. "Marilee? I need a favor," I said quickly. "Can you check something for me? Evan's birth records. I just need to know if someone requested changes. Anything sealed, anything off." She didn't ask why. She just sighed. "Give me 20 minutes. While I waited, my mind wandered. Back to the night Evan was born. How the nurse had come in, whispering about paperwork delays. "Some families push things around," she'd muttered under her breath. I thought she meant rich people skipping lines. Now I wasn't so sure. Josie called back 23 minutes later. "There was a reissue request," she said slowly, "filed 2 weeks after Evan's birth, signed by someone named Alicia Loretti. Alicia's maiden name. Exactly. But here's the kicker. It was denied, because the hospital flagged a mismatch. Your name is on record as mother, but the reissue request came from a non-parent. It was quietly sealed to avoid legal complication." My stomach twisted. Why wasn't I told? They didn't want to scare you, and I'm guessing someone made a donation to keep it quiet. I paced the kitchen, heart thudding so loud I could hear it in my throat. If Alicia tried to tamper with Evan's record, what else had she done? Reed texted just then. "You okay?" I typed back, "I got something too," from my mailbox. They know I know. We met later that evening, this time in my apartment, lights dim, Evan fast asleep in the next room. I showed him the envelope. He scanned it in silence, then sat heavily on the couch. "My father's behind this," he said flatly. "He's wanted me married to Alicia since we were 19. Said it would merge the families, clean up our image, solidify our board seats." "And Evan? If he's mine, Alicia loses all leverage. She becomes just a bitter ex with a false narrative." I sat beside him, the weight of what we now carried pressing into my shoulders like wet cement. "Marilee," Reed said, turning toward me, "I think they wanted you out of the picture. Completely. That night, whatever they planned, it wasn't just about humiliation. It was about erasing you." I nodded. "Well, they failed." And I meant it. I stood up, crossed the room, and pulled my coat off the hook. The cold fabric jolted my skin, and with it came clarity. "If they want a war? Fine," I said, gripping my purse, "but this time, I won't be quiet." I opened the door, looked back once to check Evan's baby monitor, then headed into the hallway. I knew exactly where I needed to go first, the lawyer who helped cover it all up. I pulled away from the curb, hands tight on the wheel, heart still echoing with what I'd just uncovered. The sky had darkened, a soft haze trailing the edges of the windshield as the sun dipped behind the hills. Traffic was light for a Saturday evening, and I used the drive to quiet the storm rising inside me. The lawyer could wait till tomorrow. Reed had asked me to join dinner with Alicia's family. Just for Evan, he'd said. They said they want to make peace. That phrase alone should have been enough to make me run, but a part of me, tired and cornered, wanted to believe maybe, just maybe, they'd treat my son as more than a pawn. So I said yes. I changed Evan into his soft blue onesie, the one with the little stitched bear on the chest. He looked up at me with such innocence, cooing as I tucked a blanket around him. I whispered, "We'll be fine. Just dinner, in and out." I repeated it like a prayer, just dinner, in and out. Reed came by to drive us. He looked uneasy, almost as if he knew this was a terrible idea but didn't have the backbone to say so. The ride to Alicia's parents' estate was quiet. Evan hummed softly in the back seat, while Reed fiddled with his cufflink, eyes on everything but me. The estate looked like something out of a bridal magazine: columns, ivy, candlelit windows flickering behind gauzy curtains. But the moment I stepped inside, the warmth stopped at the door. It was like walking into a stage set. Everyone smiled too much, too polished, too still. "Merrily," Alicia said with a sugary lilt, sweeping over in a navy silk gown. "Glad you could make it." Her eyes flitted to Evan and lingered a beat too long. She didn't ask to hold him. We entered the dining room, and that's when I noticed it. Each guest had a polished silver place card, name neatly etched in cursive. Except me. At first I thought they'd forgotten. Then I saw the seat they left me. Wedged between Aunt Lorraine, who once told me I lacked grace, and a man I'd never seen in my life. Reed was on the other end of the table next to Alicia. Of course. No one mentioned the missing card. No one apologized. They just kept smiling, pouring wine, clinking glasses, making small talk like it wasn't intentional. I fed Evan bits of soft carrots and mashed potatoes from my plate while trying not to make eye contact with the woman beside me, who spent more time inspecting her nails than acknowledging my existence. The air felt thinner, a little too quiet. Then, midway through dessert, it happened. Alicia stood and gently tapped her glass. "Everyone," she said with a saccharine smile, "since we're all family here, and we all love the truth, right?" I knew that tone. The room quieted. Even Evan stopped fussing. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I thought tonight would be the perfect time to address the elephant in the room." She paused for effect, eyes locked on me. "This is a lab requisition form for a paternity test. For Evan." Gasps flickered around the table. "If there's nothing to hide," Alicia went on, her smile never slipping, "we can do it tonight. I've arranged for a nurse to be on standby, right outside." I didn't move. Couldn't. I turned to Reed. He didn't look angry, just stunned. His eyes dropped to the table. "You told me you believed me," I whispered, barely able to form the words. He didn't answer. The silence pressed down like a weight. Evan whimpered, sensing the tension. Alicia motioned toward the hallway. "Shall I call her in?" I slowly stood, picked up Evan, and walked to the head of the table. My voice when it came was calm, almost too calm. "I came here tonight out of decency," I said, looking around the room, "because I thought maybe, just maybe, you cared enough about this child to treat us with respect. But I see now I was invited as entertainment. Nothing more." I unfolded the test request form Alicia had so proudly waved, and in one clean motion, tore it down the middle. "You don't get to accuse my son and still call this family. You don't get to humiliate me in front of strangers and pretend it's kindness." No one moved. No one dared breathe. "I won't raise Evan in a house that weaponizes dinner tables and bloodlines." Then I turned and walked out. No screaming, no drama. Just the quiet clip of my heels across polished wood floors, Evan's small breath against my shoulder. By the time we got home, the sky had opened up. Light rain tapped against the windows, gentle and steady. I set Evan down in his crib, kissed his forehead, and stood for a long moment just watching him sleep. Eventually, I went to the kitchen table, retrieved the envelope from earlier that day, the one with the torn medical records and the suspiciously marked birth certificate. Something had nagged at me even then. I unfolded the paper again. At the bottom of the certificate was a signature I hadn't seen the first time. My name, signed in blue ink. But I never signed anything. My throat tightened. My chest burned. I whispered, almost to myself, "They forged my name." The pen dropped from my fingers, and then, without thinking, I reached for my phone, opened the voice memo app, and pressed record. Because if they were willing to fake that, what else had they buried? I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, Evan asleep in his crib, watching the lights of the city flicker and fade like lies unraveling in the dark. By sunrise, I was already dressed. I packed a copy of the forged document, tucked it into a folder, and left a note on the counter for the babysitter. Evan would stay with Mrs. Jensen, our neighbor down the hall, warm, safe, unaware. The downtown office building hadn't changed. Still gray, still sterile. But my footsteps felt different as I walked through the marble lobby, past the receptionist who barely glanced up. I knew exactly where I was going. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe guilt aged him faster. Gregory Langston, the lawyer who'd helped them file all their pristine little documents. He blinked twice when he saw me at his door. "Merrily," he said, standing up too quickly, knocking a coffee mug that sloshed onto the desk. "I wasn't expecting you." I placed the folder on his desk without sitting. "I have a few questions about this." He opened it. His face lost color fast. "I never signed that," I said quietly, "and yet it's been filed as if I did." "You filed it." He ran a hand over his jaw. I assumed you were aware. Reed handed me this, said you were on board. I didn't." "You didn't what?" I cut in. "Didn't check? Didn't verify the signature? That's your job, isn't it?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His fingers trembled as he adjusted his glasses. I pressed a small button on my phone screen in my pocket. Recording. "Let me be very clear," I said, voice calm. "You're not the first man to underestimate me, but you might be the last who does it on paper." He looked at the document again. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Alicia and her mother, they came to me first. They said it was just paperwork to protect Reed's holdings. Future-proofing, they called it. My breath caught. "You mean protect his assets in case Evan turned out to be his?" He hesitated, then nodded. "They told me it was better if there was a preemptive agreement, that it would avoid drama later on. They said you wanted it too, that you'd signed." My voice dropped. "So they forged my name. Twice now." His eyes darted to the door. "Merrily, you need to be careful. These people, they're not just rich, they're strategic. That trust from your late aunt? Alicia had me process that too." My stomach turned. "The trust?" "She was co-listed, but 6 months ago, it was transferred to Alicia. The documents I received, again, looked signed by you." I sat down, finally. Not from exhaustion, from clarity, like something snapped into place. "So you're telling me that over the past year they've slowly been erasing me, legally, silently, piece by piece." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know it would hurt you." I leaned in. "You didn't care." His eyes dropped. That was all the answer I needed. 2 hours later, I stood outside Reed's office building. A sleek tower of tinted glass and ego. I had the flash drive in my coat pocket. It held every second of the lawyer's confession, clean and clear. I walked past his assistant without a word. The look she gave me was half curious, half afraid. Reed was on a call. I waited. When he looked up and saw me, his jaw tightened. "Merrily, I set the flash drive on his desk. "Play it." He paused, then plugged it in. The silence in the room stretched as Langston's voice poured from the speakers. By the end, Reed was pale. visibly shaken. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I thought. Alicia told me it was all just precautionary. I was scared." I stood. "You didn't need courage. You needed character." "Marilee, wait. Please. I didn't want to hurt you. I just didn't know how to stop it all." I looked at him. Really looked. And I saw it. Not malice. Just weakness. The kind that looks the other way while others draw blood. "There's no wedding," I said. "Not now, not ever." I turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" he asked, voice breaking. "To court," I replied. "And read. This time I'll be the one writing the papers." That night, I curled up beside Evan. His tiny hand rested on my arm as I checked my phone one last time before sleep. A headline had just been posted. "March wedding of Alicia Quinn and Reed Langston canceled indefinitely." The courthouse hall echoed under my boots as I stepped forward, Evan balanced on my hip. His tiny fingers curled around the collar of my coat, soft breath brushing my neck. I held him close, not just because I needed to, but because today, I wasn't walking in as a woman scorned. I was walking in as his shield, his mother, and for once I felt steady, not shaking, not afraid, just ready. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and something sterile like justice trying to hide how human it really was. I found my seat, shifted Evan gently into the chair beside me with a juice pouch, and waited. Reed sat across the aisle, hands folded in his lap. His eyes didn't meet mine. He looked thinner, hollowed out, alone. Alicia wasn't there. The judge walked in, a woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes that scanned us like she'd seen this all before. Maybe she had, but this time she was going to see it end differently. "Miss Bundy," she began, "you've requested a full custody review, along with legal motions regarding forged documentation and trust mismanagement." "Yes, Your Honor," I said, rising to my feet. My voice didn't shake. "And I have the proof." I handed over the flash drive, the printed files, and a notarized affidavit from Langston, the lawyer who'd buckled under the weight of guilt just 2 weeks prior. The judge reviewed them carefully, taking her time, letting silence do the heavy lifting. Reed's attorney leaned forward, whispered something. He stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to resolve this matter privately, without dragging this into a full legal proceeding. My client is—" She held up a hand. "I'm looking at a falsified consent form for property transfer, a doctored trust clause, and a recorded confession. Your client isn't here to settle. He's here to answer." Reed's eyes flicked up for just a second. Regret bloomed too late. The judge continued, flipping through the documents. "And where is Alicia Quinn?" "She declined to appear, Your Honor," the lawyer muttered. "Of course she did. Cowards don't face fires they started." "I see," the judge said dryly. "In that case," I held my breath. "This court grants full and permanent legal custody of the minor child, Evan Bundy, to his mother, Miss Marilee Bundy. Any agreements signed under fraudulent pretenses are hereby void. A civil investigation into trust manipulation and fraud is recommended and will proceed." I exhaled, not dramatically, not with a gasp or tears, just quietly. Evan looked up at me from his juice box. "Can we go home now, Mama?" I smiled. "Yeah, baby, we can go home." Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter, as if the clouds had been waiting for the verdict, too. A small group of people lingered, press, mostly. A man with a microphone jogged up. "Miss Bundy, just one question. Is it true Reed Langston is the child's father?" I stopped, looked him in the eye. "That boy's father," I said, steady and low, "is the man who shows up when it's hard. That's not Reed." I kissed Evan's forehead and walked past them, each step quieter than the one before. We made it home before sunset. Evan ran to the kitchen to show Mrs. Jensen his birthday drawings. His party was tomorrow. He was excited. But I was exhausted. There was a large envelope on the kitchen table, cream-colored, no return address. But the handwriting was familiar. I opened it slowly. It was from my aunt's estate lawyer, dated 2 years ago. The letter read, "Marilee, in case they ever betray you, know this. I changed the trust's final clause. Only the child who bears your name, Bundy, can inherit. Love always, Aunt Ruth. I stared at the paper, then at Evan, coloring with a broken crayon on the floor. Not Alicia, not Reed, not their future. Mine. His. He looked up just then and held out the crayon drawing, just a red heart with shaky letters inside. Mom, it said. I knelt down. One day, I whispered, you'll read the truth. All of it. But today, you're safe. And that's enough. Later that night I watched him sleep, his little chest rising, falling. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and thought about the girl I used to be. The one who was always trying to earn love, to prove her worth, to hold together a broken house with both hands and no nails. That girl didn't get a happy ending. But this woman, me, she learned to write a new one. As I closed the bedroom door, I passed the hallway wall where I'd started hanging pictures again. Just us. No filters, no frames that didn't fit. Over the image of Evan blowing out a single candle, I said, almost to myself, I'm not angry for me anymore. I'm angry for the little girl I used to be, the one nobody protected. I paused, listened to the quiet. Evan has what I never had, I continued. A mother who stays, a name that means something, and a future no one can steal. Have you ever been falsely accused by your own blood and still had to stay strong for your child? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.